I'd like to welcome you to the March 24th, 2022 meeting of the Nsdp. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting in February. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, it's been
Second.
moved and seconded to approve the meetings of our February meeting. Those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, minutes have been approved. Alex, I'd like to turn it over to you, sir.
All right, good morning, everybody. So we kind of flipped the agenda again today. So we have a fairly long presentation, but we also have one action item. So we made that first to make sure we get it taken care of quickly here. So item 3.01 is award of a general contract to T-Built Construction Services Incorporated, and Ansley Stevenson will be presenting for you virtually today.
Good morning, everybody. Go ahead and share my screen.
Good morning.
Okay, this project is for interior renovations at Hiltonia Middle School. I don't know if everybody remembers from last meeting, but we brought forward the HVAC portion of this project last month. So this will be the remainder of the project. This includes a lot of general trades work, some flooring, painting, new wall construction, electrical, to round out the project. Again, this is to bring a couple new CTE classes to Hiltonia Middle School, and this just supports some reprogramming of the interior to let that happen. I'll go through this agenda now for us. The first thing here is the copy of our advertisement. This runs in the dispatch 2 times, 1 week apart. So this ran on March 1st and March 8th. This just basically points people to our district website where they can get more information. That same information is then posted to Ohio MBE's website. And then once they get to the district website, they get this additional information. This tells them our estimate for the work, where they can procure bid documents, when our pre-bid meeting will be, and how to attend that meeting. This is our agenda for the pre-bid meeting. This gives vendors a lot of information about our bid process, how bids can be submitted. We lay out a little bit of more information about the bid, if they have any questions on the bid form or the alternates we've laid out. We also give them our major milestone dates. That includes when bids are due, when these oversight meetings are held, when it will go to board, and when work on site will begin, and when we expect it to be substantially complete. For this project, we ended up with 5 alternates. On this agenda here, you only see 4, but when we go to the bid tab, there's a 5th that we added in an addendum. We had 3 companies that attended the pre-bid walkthrough. I believe only 2 of those attended the pre-bid meeting, but all 3 companies that attended our pre-bid walkthrough did submit a bid for us. This is our bid tab that shows those 3 companies we received bids from. Highlighted in green, T-Built Construction was our low bidder. You can see here, we asked for 5 alternates. We are only going to move forward with 3 of those alternates. So we're not going to be accepting alternate 1, which is crossed out here, and we're not going to be accepting alternate 3. That will make their total $252,855. This is our engineer triad, their recommendation letter for the bid. On this next slide, I've just crossed out those 2 alternates that we're not going to accept. So their total legislation is shown here. Again, that's $252,855. Once again, this is an ESSER funded project, so I've just highlighted that here on our legislation as well. This is the front page of our working contract. We're just using our standard contract for this project. And lastly, our LADE form. This is a pretty small project. He did make a good faith effort to get to the 20%, but he's only able to get 4.5% from his painting subcontractor on this project. And Terry Wise has reviewed and approved that form. That's the end of my presentation. If anybody has any questions.
Thanks, Ansley. Appreciate it. Any questions or comments from the group?
Maybe one thing I'll just add for you, this project's a little unique for us in terms of its funding source. So if you're familiar with the ESSER funding, it is kind of our federal funding to assist with COVID relief. And while most of our projects have been very focused on improving like the climate, so our HVAC projects, this is one that actually looks at closing achievement gaps. So looking at those gaps that have occurred as a result of the need for distance learning over that period of time. And this is looking at a particular way of leveraging curriculum and project-based learning to help close those gaps. I think this is a pretty cool project that we get to work on with that school.
Great. Great use of funds, too.
Great,
That
thank you, sir.
I would make a motion to accept the contract in
Okay,
advance.
Thank you, sir. There a second?
Second.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to approve project 22014. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. The project has been approved. Ansley, thanks again, once again.
Thanks, everybody.
Alex, back to you, my friend, to cover the rest of the items.
All right, so this takes us to the real meat of the agenda today. So item 4.01 is our facility master plan update. So Dennis and Rob and Randall with Leggett Architects are here, and they'll do the majority of that presentation, but I do have a little introduction that I want to just kind of walk you through. So we're incredibly excited to bring this proposal to you today. It's been many, many, many months in the making. I think I heard Dennis chattering before the meeting about how long it's been since we initially kicked off this project. So I think we're just at about a year since we began public engagement. But as you know, it is a very long process to bring these kinds of proposals through to fruition. So just to give some context of kind of where we stand overall facility-wise within our district. So I know I've reported before that we operate at 112 academic facilities. 46 of those facilities have already been through our master plan. The average age for those 46 facilities is 13 years, so we're looking pretty good on the new buildings. Those other 66 buildings have an average age of 66 years. And so when you look at them in aggregate, we're at 44 years, which is well above the target age we'd like to be at. I don't know that there's any one source that's going to give you a target there, but 50 years is generally the anticipated useful life for a building before it goes through a major renovation of some sort. And so using that metric, ideally we'd be looking at having an average portfolio age of about 25 years. And so we're clearly above that, and it's certainly a target that we'd like to get closer to. But having said that, kind of thinking through, how to present and kind of help people understand why this work is so important. I would just say at our scale and having those 112 buildings, there's never going to be one point in time where the buildings are all new, right? That's just not the reality. So this work needs to be continuing in an ongoing basis. And I think we also have to think about evolution. Like building design is always going to evolve, or it should evolve, just like our academic programming is going to evolve. And so we'll always have buildings that are going to be in different stages of their age, different points in their cycle. And so as I was just kind of flipping through pictures and kind of thinking about how to drive home the point. So turn of the previous century classroom, and believe it or not, we still have some buildings in operation that have not been through a comprehensive renovation, basically from this time frame. Not to say we haven't made many incremental improvements to make sure those buildings are suitable for our students and for our staff. But from a timing standpoint, we still have these kinds of buildings in our portfolio. And then, of course, over the ensuing century of work, we've upgraded many facilities here at CCS. But the reality is many of them, they don't look all that different. We've made incremental upgrades. The condition is far better. The finishes are new. But if you look at the layouts, not a lot changed necessarily in many of those timeframes. And then I think through this facility master planning process, our community has really started to see more images that look like this. So this is where we see education going. So we're more about project-based learning. We're thinking about group learning. We're thinking about independent studying and having more of a focus on mastery of content. We're looking at things like social, emotional learning. And I would say just by nature, this kind of work tends to be messy. It's not as organized as we're used to. It's not that industrial mindset. It's a more creative mindset. I think incredibly exciting. And yeah, like I said, it by nature doesn't have as much construct to it. It's kind of messy, and I think that's kind of what makes it so neat. And so I also kind of stole this slide from Leggett's presentations that we used with the community. So it's about this big shift we're looking at. So as you kind of read this slide left to right, I'm not going to read all the bullet points there, but it's moving from this environment of controlled access with controlled learning. Looking at standardization, right? Everything needs to be the same. We're looking for the same outcome out of every student and looking for that uniformity, to really moving towards this idea where we're opening access and expanding learning. We're thinking about individualization, like how does education match each student's needs? and all those unique opportunities that come with it. And so I also wanted to at least take a few quick moments to talk about our district's strategic plan. So even as you walked into the building today, hopefully you saw the posters. Our district has started a real targeted engagement with the community around the district's new strategic plan and the 4 strategic priorities. And again, I'm not going to read this whole slide, but those 4 strategic priorities are a whole child focus, equitable opportunities for all, strong learning communities in every region, and authentic engagement. And I think you'll see with time how these strategic priorities are going to flow right into what we're talking about in this master plan. And then on the right side of the slide, this idea of power of one, that everybody has some role to play in the success of our school district, of our students, and that every person has an opportunity to make a difference. Every organization has a role to play. And also, you'll see underlined, students leading the way. So this real focus that our students should be at the center, the core, the heart of everything that we do and all the decisions that we make. And then I know you've seen this before as well, which is our portrait of a graduate, which is rolled into the strategic plan. So it is integral to the strategic plan. And those 6 key attributes that we aspire for our students to master by the time they leave us as graduating seniors. And those 6 key attributes are adaptability, communication, creativity, critical thinking, global empathy, and technology. And so a real focus here on making sure that we're very aligned between the district strategic plan and what this master plan is going to envision as well. Like this portrait of a graduate will really be our North Star. It should guide all of our work. And so I kind of wanted to go back to some imagery. And I was thinking about this last night as I was preparing for today, and just I thought it was meaningful to take a personal experience about how we've seen facilities evolve, really in a fairly short period of time. So when I opened my first building here at the district about 15 years ago, this is what a computer lab looked like. You know, technology was a place you went to learn technology skills. It wasn't really integrated into every aspect of what we do in terms of education. And so we know at this point, we already pretty much look like this. I believe we have a Chromebook or some sort of device in every one of our students' hands, and our students have access to the technology whenever it's appropriate. And so to think that in just 15 short years, we've made that leap, moving from computers that are very static, are very noisy, very power intensive, need a dedicated space, to technologies everywhere. And yet where I still think we're trying to get to is this kind of a model where technology is, it's not its own curriculum necessarily, it is everywhere. It has a place in just about anything we do to teach students. And what does that really mean for facilities? How do we design facilities that are prepared so that our students are number one, leading the way, but also prepared for their life as they exit our system as graduating seniors? And then again, just to touch back on what is the master plan. So it is going to be this living document, and it is going to be about a plan that's going to be a 12 to 20-year plan. It is going to reflect those visions of the portrait of a graduate. It is going to be systematic change. It is going to be transformational for this district. It will look at utilization and enrollment in all of our regions. It'll be looking at locating these schools in an equitable way, and then creating a cost-effective plan that maximizes our state co-share funds from the state of Ohio. And then again, just to remind everybody that like this work is really just the foundational work. It's maybe a little painful that you won't necessarily see what gets built, hopefully, out of this plan is not what we're talking about today. This is really just the foundation for that work. The next steps after this work would be having the board move this plan forward. And then the district would need to dive into some very intense programming exercises with our staff, with our families, with our students, talking about exactly what is the program that we would desire at each of these facilities. And then obviously at that point we would be looking at bringing on design teams to help develop programs of requirements, which are really what would start to express what those buildings would look like. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis Pabin and Robin Randall to show you the proposal for segment 4.
Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate that sharing, and thanks so much for having us this morning. We appreciate the opportunity to share the hard work that this group has been through over almost 2 years now in terms of the start of the program. So what we're going to share today is a summary and the recommendation that has come from this master planning process. And I appreciate what Alex has shared. That's really the background of what has led to this point in time. It's really a regional look at an overall recommendation. And keep in mind that this is just the first phase of that 12 to 20 year endeavor. So it may just seem like we're touching a few schools, but this is the start of something and moving forward. It's also the continuation. So it's called segment 4 because we've been through segment 1 through 3. So as you know, we are here today. We're going to review each of the schools. We're going to pause after each of the schools for questions and conversation. This is really meant to be a discussion. So if you have questions, please share them as we go. We're going to review the proposed segment plan. And what that plan looks like is the new school size and the new school location. And then we'd like for you to talk about the pros and cons of each of the schools. Next month, we're hoping that you're comfortable with the plan and be able to recommend that to the Board of Education. The future of the district decisions include academic programming and school boundary adjustments. That's not part of the conversation today, but that will happen in the future, much like what Alex described as we look at programming and specifics to each of the schools. Keep in mind also that the timeline is eventually in the fall to go out for a question to the public. So that's where we're headed in the path to implement over the next 20 years these facilities. All the sites were based on these 4 criteria in terms of selection. The conditions of the facilities, and Alex covered that. I mean, what do we need for education and what would help support learning better? The location, and that also has to do with equity across the district. The ability to develop a new school while continuing operations in the existing facility during construction, and this is critical so that we don't have to build temporary facilities to move kids around. We can actually implement without moving. And then offering the ability to use the current school as a swing space for future projects. So again, so we're not wasting good tax dollars. We're using them in a very prudent and equitable way. The process has been a very deliberate community engagement process where we've connected with all communities and all schools, high schools and junior highs. In that process, it has led us to this segment. So there's real data, there's real consequence to get here. So this is the process. Is the summary of the segment. So I'm going to turn it over to Dennis.
Thank you, Robin. Pardon me. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. Again, the document that's in front of you is exactly what's on the screen. So it's there's no need to flip back and forth. As we continue through this process and we've gone through the connection with the community and what they've told us through our engagement process, we are now meeting regularly with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. As we move forward with this presentation and the proposal for segment 4, you will be seeing a lot of data. And a lot of that data is driven by a formulaic approach, an equitable approach statewide that the state provides. What you see here is an example of the program of requirements bracket. So the square footage allotments are based on those allocations that are given to us from the state. Every project, as you move forward, will be filling out this bracket. Alex mentioned prior to our presentation that each school will be going through its programming exercise, and this is what that is. When you hire your design professionals to start the work, this is where they will begin, as long as it is a co-funded project. The number that you see in red, or the highlighted figures, those are the components of the bracket that are district decision points. Everything else is derived data from the state. Our first project, we are calling High School 1. It is at the Beery Middle School site, directly adjacent to Marion Franklin. The Marion Franklin site has plenty of benefits, as Robin discussed, through our criteria. We can build on the current site with no swing space needed. There is no need to utilize any funding for a temporary space for teachers and students. We can use the existing building after the new building is constructed as a swing space for future projects. There are challenges within that facility, but again, you can allocate the facilities you already have. There is a pool community recreation center across the street. The Columbus Recreation and Parks Department has been ongoing with an aquatic study, and this is their project 1 as well. So that pool will be renovated. And we are adjacent on Lockbourne Road to a CODA drop-off spot. The challenges, and this will be something that is continuous through all of the sites that we will be presenting this morning, is that according to the formula driven by the OFCC, the site is smaller than what they recommend. We are an urban district. We do not have a lot of the land that can be allocated. So understand that there will be some challenges designing the site holistically when we present where the project will be, but also that there will be some maneuvering from a holistic point of view as far as site design. And there will be some redistribution of enrollment. As Alex said previously, that this is a transformational change. This is a systematic change. So the amount of students, the size of school is different from anything that has been done in the district before. So part of the next phase, which will be Columbus City Schools' decisions, is how are we going to enroll this facility? We did a study of the local enrollment, and based on the enrollment projections that were provided to us by an organization called FutureThink that was hired through the OFCC, we feel that the 1,600 student school at this location is appropriate. According to the data given us to the state, it's 162 square feet per student, so about a 259,000 square foot facility. Now, there are components, and again, there is a lot of data that's presented here, that are decision points for the district, and those are called locally funded initiatives. Those are components of the facility that are requirements of the district for the future of their student education experience, and they may not be funded by the state or co-funded by the state. And the two examples that we present here are outdoor athletics and a fixed seat auditorium. So those are components that are up for discussion. We're looking at about a $90 million total project, and we're calling this project 1 for a reason. So as soon as we're able to sign, or the district is able to sign into an agreement with a design professional as early 2023, and about a 1.5-year design process. This is a sizable facility, and there are a series of checks and balances that the state requires. So the design process is rather lengthy, and the construction for a facility of this size is about 2 years. The diagram shows a square foot analysis. So as we were exploring all of these sites, and this is a continuation for all of the projects we are going to present, is okay, we have a school of this size, we have a site that we want to use, can the building fit? So what we've done is taken that bracket that you've seen at the beginning of the presentation and just created just areas. There is no design put into this. It is simply allocating area to the site and does it fit? So so we can have at least some knowledge that we can design a facility of this size on this site. This one in particular, because of how the site could work and where the existing curb cuts are, we did some initial study of how some site traffic could work with the adjacent existing school and how the new school could be allocated to it. With that, are there any questions for this particular project? Please.
I have a quick question. Currently on the site, there's a high school and a middle school. And at the conclusion of this, there'll just be a high school, is that correct?
At the end of the master plan, you are correct. So the new building would be on the location of where the middle school is.
Okay.
And then after the completion of the master plan, so we're talking, again, this is a 12 to 20-year plan. So at the end of that 20 years, this site would just be a high school site for one school.
Perfect. Thank you.
I do have a question, and certainly don't mean to get into the weeds, but I know the site very well. And I'm just curious, as you go through the design process, I know there will be some limitations and some opportunities, but as you start to design on a tough site, what are you looking at? What could be restrictions other than just the size? Are you looking at going up in order to accommodate that? And that in itself, would that be a problem as you design for certain classes, grades?
No, the intent in most schools designed through, especially co-funded projects, you have a lot of efficiencies through a two-story school. And it is not unheard of that you could go up to 3. Some of the other challenges, particularly with this site, is there will be a lot of site design regarding storm drainage, because this is a large flat site that has not been previously designed, and the way the adjacent neighborhoods and even the adjacent project, a lot of where this project is, where the stormwater flows. So there will be some additional site design incorporated for this particular site.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
What we are calling High School 2, our second project to present to you today, is a high school at the existing Beechcroft site. So as you look at the aerial photo, we would be building on that south to southeast corner. The benefits, again, is that we can utilize the existing school while the new school is under construction. There is an adjacent bus line, and there is also an adjacent community park. Again, the challenge with the site design is that from a holistic standpoint, the site is smaller than the formulaic approach that the commission presents. And something in particular with this site is that this project is centered within a pretty dense residential neighborhood. So it's something that we would have to be clear that construction is inherently messy and noisy. But because we're in the middle of a residential neighborhood, we just have to be upfront with the community that over the couple of years of construction, that this project will be a challenge. There we go. Again, the analysis of the enrollment, and we're looking at the future growth of the city. We are proposing a 2,000 student high school for this particular project. When you increase your students, the formula drives that the square footage is reduced slightly, but we will get to a 316,800 square foot facility at a minimum. Again, the idea with having a new high school is that proposing the 2 locally funded initiatives of a fixed seat auditorium and outdoor athletics are presented within this. And the design schedule will be slated to be 6 to 8 months behind the high school 1. That is very strategic in that proposal for 2 reasons. One is that your co-funding partner, the state, really, for schools of this size, it's about resource allocation. Having construction resources for the same 2 buildings of this size at the same time stretches a lot of what we can provide here in Central Ohio. So instead of all concrete or all steel or all masonry all at the same time, they want to stretch out and have those resources more spread apart across the city. And then secondly is an opportunity for the district's academic team to program 2 schools in line, not at the same time. Again, with this being the generational shift within how education is delivered amongst the district, having to program 2 new schools of this size would be quite a challenge for the district's academic and curriculum teams. So we're having those opportunities to spread those out from a design standpoint as well. Again, the diagram shows the school of this size. Again, Mr. Williams, it would be a 2-story. The idea is that the components of this facility would be 2 stories. But any questions for this project? Please.
The location shows the radius for student collection, 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile. A majority of that radius is outside the district. Are there any comments about why it's not maybe a little bit more centralized to capture more students within the district's boundary?
I think for this particular project, it was basically solely based on where we could have a site this size.
Okay.
So I understand that that radius does reach outside of the district, but we also have those areas that aren't directly connected, that are closer to the northeastern suburbs. So we have more proximity for that. But I think for this size of project in the part of town that is showing substantial growth, that having a site the size that we need, this is where this is the furthest
option
into the city we could get for this, for the northern high school.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question. I guess it relates to both, and the trend, that I'm assuming it's going to relate to all of this, is where we have deficiencies in the acreage versus the recommended. Where do we really see the impact of that? If we're really keeping it to 2-story buildings, then is it the circulation? Is it the green space requirements, parking? Where do we really see that reduction impacting or potentially impacting students?
It would be the latter components. So the amount of green space, the efficiencies of how you can organize your athletics, that you have to be a lot more condensed. Your parking and your circulation would be more condensed. And something to consider too, outside of that, along the lines of the green space, is a lot of what we've discussed with the Marion Franklin site in particular is the stormwater detention. The city won't just let you, or any municipality for that matter, won't just have the stormwater just run off or collect. I mean, it all has to be designed. So how that is integrated within the completion of the whole site design is a lot where those challenges would be. It's definitely not facilitating the new school.
Yeah, and I think that's just important. It's really a design solution at the end of the day.
Yes.
There may be other financial impacts on management of stormwater and some of those. It's more an efficiency, not really negatively impacting the building and the experience.
I think that's a great way to put it. It's more of a study of efficiency and not necessarily a restriction of what you can have.
And I'm assuming, again, with the first high school and then here, because the first high school is located near, Columbus Recreation and Parks, there may be opportunities either for shared stormwater or shared amenity space for things that, as you're moving through design, that you'll constantly be looking at, or the design team will be looking at to make sure maybe there's ways to pick up some of those efficiencies with adjacent properties. Not so much at Beechcroft. We know there's some challenges there. The other question I have, again, for both of these, but on Beechcroft, are we looking at redoing the outdoor athletics or renovating or modernization? Because, if they're in existing locations, how is that really treated in?
Because we were approaching as a rebuild, because the entire site has to be redesigned, and all of those athletic facilities are in some, just like Alex mentioned for your school facilities, all the athletic facilities are in some need of repair. So looking at the site holistically, we provided the numbers in the budget as if they were going to be replaced. That provides the opportunity to design the site as a whole. So you're not just shoehorning in a new building or having to weave you could design this entire 50-acre plot of land as a new site.
Will there be considerations, however, moving forward? So if there's a situation here that, maybe it's recognized the potential for savings and maybe doing a renovation instead of a complete
absolutely.
rebuild, those are all design considerations that this is a kind of our worst case scenario.
Yes.
If everything has to be replaced, as if we are designing a whole new school on the site, that's the approach we need to take budget-wise, but we're still going to continue to look for opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, thanks. Just wanted to note that
No,
for everybody, so.
I'll jump in quick on
Please.
this one too, because so Jim, I think these questions are spot on. I think that at this point you have to take the conservative approach, right? We have to assume kind of the worst case scenario. I think we're very comfortable in assuming that all buildings would be 2-story. I know previously we've built a number of 1-story buildings. At this size, I'd be shocked if we had any 1-story buildings.
Right.
I don't think zoning will be any issue for us to build 2-story buildings at any of these sites. I think when we get into the design phase, we would probably take a hard look at whether it made sense to go 3 stories. I don't know that there's any additional penalty to a building development, once you've already got an elevator system and there's so many systems that you'll have to go multi-story. I just don't know whether zoning will allow it without variances, and then of course you've got to talk through neighborhood associations and whether they're going to agree. So, you start with that conservative approach, but obviously every one of those decisions has a ripple effect. So if you go 3 stories, you have less roof area, which means you've got less stormwater runoff, which means you've got less need for detaining water. It gives you more access for open space, potentially more space for parking if you need it. So these questions are spot on, and I think at this point we take that conservative approach. And should we be fortunate enough to get this plan across the finish line and get it funded, that's when we really roll up our sleeves and figure out exactly how these sites get developed.
Thanks.
If I may, I agree with all of that, and knowing neighborhoods and knowing the neighbors as you go through this and design, when you have a tight site, you have to look at all of these things because you got folks next door, neighbors, right? So you can't back up. Well, you may back up a football field 15 feet away from a neighbor's subdivision. That's going to be very problematic. So you got to be able to balance all of that, and so the best way to balance is to look at all those elements and see what you come up with, and see what you need to propose. Education is important, but again, education in the middle of a neighborhood and all these other amenities you want to add in terms of sports and other activities, you really need to take a balanced approach to how you look at it and design it. I'm sure you heard that before.
Oh, absolutely.
So we appreciate you sharing it. Thank you. Yeah.
And just as a side note, back to the formulaic approach that your funding partner has, that there's even a toggle on the bracket of the square footage allotment for a 1 to 2 story building versus 3 stories or greater. So so if the site design led itself to be more of a taller facility and there wasn't the need for variances, or the zoning department okayed it, that just that toggle will adjust the total square footage. So all of those items are allocated already within that bracket. Our third project to present to you today, we are calling Middle School 1. And we have proposed the site at south of the Mifflin Middle School site. Again, back to our criteria that of all the facilities in the district, this particular facility is of most need of repair. So providing a new facility here, we really feel using the site that's already available and being able to provide a newer facility at the site would be a benefit. There is also a community center across the street that we could possibly pursue additional partnerships as well. And a challenge with this particular facility is the low attendance in this area, this particular portion of the city. Just how the allocation is right now, those would just have to be analyzed further by the district. We are proposing a 1,000 student middle school, again, because of when looking at the procession of middle school to high school, having a larger middle school, we feel would be very appropriate. There is a smaller allocation per square foot for middle school students, so it would be about a 140,000 square foot building. To give you some idea of scale, the existing middle school that's on that site is about 114,000. So this would be a substantially bigger project. Total project of about $53 million, and the LFI that we're looking at too is the same thing for the high schools, that there was a desire to have an auditorium and the pursuit of what would the future of middle school athletics be. So that's something that this committee and the district looking forward. We've talked about this in several of our engagements, as well as presenting it to the board with the master planning committee, is that one of what we call the tabled items of future discussion is what to do with middle school athletics, and this is allocating funding for the project to pursue the future of middle school athletics. The design would start sometime into 2024, and that is, again, strategic from an academic standpoint. So we know what we want to provide in the high schools by this point, so going from middle school to high school, what does that look like? It's a different study, and because of the size of the school and the approach, the new approach to learning, the new vision for learning, what is the experience of middle school students going in there, and it provides the academic team some time. Any questions for the middle school project?
I have a quick question. You indicated that there's low attendance at this site. Is there any particular reason that's the case? And you have how is that going to be addressed with this newer, larger facility put on the site?
That is going to be a district discussion of how that's addressed. But again, with the availability and the need for a new school at this site is what really drove the decision for this.
Okay.
But just how that is going to work, of where students are coming from and how they're going to be allocated to this building, that is the next step for the district to decide upon.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Our fourth project to present to you today, we are calling Elementary School 1. This is at the current Winterset site off of Henderson Road. Again, similar to the previous projects, is this site allows the building of a new school facility while the existing facility can remain intact and in use. The challenge with this is, unlike some of the other projects that we've discussed, is that due to site size and just the constraint of an elementary school, this would not lead itself into presenting both a swing space and a usable space at the same time. So what that means is that you would keep school intact at the existing elementary school, you would build the new, and then when the new is complete, you'd move the students in and then demolish the existing facility to provide the amenities for the completion of the site design.
Processes. Do you anticipate having any excess property
After the completion of the plan,
after the completion of the plan?
with the allocation of more students into fewer buildings, that lends itself to, yes, there will be sites remaining. As far as what are the plans for those sites, that's for future discussion. But to answer your question, yes, there will be additional properties that the district will have.
I'm not going to ask you to name those locations, but I'm sure you already have them in mind, but I'm just kind of curious. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Sure. The size of 600 students is, again, very strategic in the decision for the new elementary school for two reasons. One, this is the minimum school size that the state will co-fund at the elementary level. And two, over the course of our community engagement processes, the community has told us in every region that they appreciate their neighborhood schools. So what we're providing, instead of saying we're going to build the biggest elementary school we can, we're going to keep the schools to a minimum size that the state will co-fund so we can keep as close to the neighborhood school as we possibly can. So we're trying to use that 600 student as a compromise. And again, similar to the middle school, that the square foot allocation is lowered for an elementary school, so all in all, you're about a 70,000 square foot facility. To put that in perspective, the existing school is about 33,000 square feet. So it is it's a very different feel from the size of a school, but when you look at what is in that Winterset Elementary, you have things such as a combined gym and dining room. You know, those are antiquated components to elementary school design. So there's going to be a lot more amenity within this new facility. And the other idea is that elementary schools, from a programmatic standpoint, they're pretty rigid within the OFCC bracket. So there wouldn't be, outside of a couple of spaces of what would be used from a programmatic standpoint in regards to curriculum delivery, there isn't going to be a major shift in how elementary schools is going to be delivered, or elementary education is going to be delivered in this new school. So this could be what we're calling the first shovel-ready project. Design would be about a year, so this would start right away. And then this would be your first project complete sometime in mid-2025, hopefully for the 25-26 school year. Any questions with the first elementary school? Our fifth and final project for segment 4 to present to you today is what we're calling Elementary School 2. And this is on, what we're proposing is that the new facility would be at the old decommissioned Wedgwood Middle School site across the street from Eakin Elementary on the west side. This would have some challenges again with site design, and again, similar to what we discussed with the Beechcroft site, is that this is rather, it's a dense residential neighborhood. So construction will be, again, exceptionally noisy and messy as we move forward through the project. And we are proposing a similar, or the same size and scope. Again, something that I forgot to mention for the previous school is that there will be we're not proposing any locally funded initiatives for the elementary schools. So basically taking what would be a co-funded project. This, again, from a strategic idea of design and resource allocation, after the design process for the first elementary school, we would be starting the design process for this one. So it would be starting early 24 and then completion towards the end of 2026. Any questions for that project? In summary, we have about a $297 million plan from a total project perspective. That leads to a CCS share of about $243 million. Design for the segment 4 would be starting in early 2023, and construction, if everything goes to plan, would be scheduled for mid-2027. We do want to provide the opportunity, with this being a public forum, that there's still time for anyone to ask us questions or send comments or concerns, and that email that has been active since the beginning of the master plan process is still active, and there are folks watching that through the district constantly. So if there are any questions, comments, or concerns, please do not hesitate, and either Alex's team or our team will be responding as quickly as we can. So with that, that's our presentation. We're happy to stick around for any other questions or comments or concerns you may have for the presentation of segment 4. And again, as Alex mentioned, this is just the next part. So this is phase 1 of the continuation of the master plan. So we're hoping that this just keeps rolling.
Well, thank you guys once again. We certainly appreciate your information and the presentation you present in such a way that it's understandable.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you filling our questions. Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Do we have any other questions or comments to the team?
I have a comment and a question. One, great job. I think I want to echo Curtis's comments that this is very complicated information presented in a way that's easy to understand. So congratulations on that effort. I guess this question is maybe towards Alex a little bit beyond the scope of this, but the plans for the impacted facilities and the student allocations to these new facilities, is that analysis going to be done during the design phase of each individual project, or at what point in time is that going to be initiated if we proceed with this plan?
Yeah, I'll take that question. So, so that is a process that we've already started. I don't think we'd wait till I don't think we'd wait till the buildings were in design. Certainly, there might be the need for some changes based on what happens with enrollment across different parts of the city. Between the time so we're kicking off that work now to make sure we have a good handle on what it would take in terms of changing those attendance areas to make sure we can get these buildings full. But I would expect that'll be a work in progress, probably right up until the time we're getting ready to, cut ribbons, or at least the year before, making sure that there's a decent chance we'll have these buildings full. So I would expect it'll be a heavy lift up front to make sure we've got a good understanding, and then probably some refinements as we move through design and construction.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would think that some of those questions would come up as part of the consideration by the residents on the vote. I mean, I think someone's going to be asking, where are my kids going?
Absolutely.
So I'm assuming being prepared for that is going to be important to be able to pass any kind of ballot initiative we'd have. I have a couple questions just kind of for me. In the budget allocation, what are you carrying for soft costs? Like, what's your, at this stage, allocation that you're at least putting to it for all the soft cost versus construction?
In that breakdown of the budget, you'll see that there's a cost per square foot. That is a total cost, total project cost that's allocated by the state. Within that cost, 16.23% of that is allocated towards soft cost and testing. So that is whether it's printing, there's items A through K, I believe, that is part of the Ohio School Design Manual. And it's anything from printing, permitting, design fees, construction management fees, soils testing, but it's a very specific percentage that is taken from that total project cost.
Yep. Sounds good. I'm always a little bit nervous of that because at this stage, there's so many unknowns, and that's probably tight, which is what the state would do to everybody, right? They're going to be a little bit more conservative, and likewise, obviously, we're seeing very different inflation rates, and I know that's the variable. It's like AFib. We're all going through that right now, but I know that's a pretty low inflation rate that you're dealing now, and I'm assuming you're estimating that to midpoints of construction for each one of those schools. So that's one that makes me a little bit nervous, and about what we're going to be asking for to make sure it's enough, so we're not, this committee and others aren't squeezing things later just because we didn't react to the market. And same with contingency. Those are pretty conservative numbers for the current and near future environment we're all in. So I don't know if there's anything more than that's a comment, or if you guys are worried about it too.
I'm glad you brought that up, is that these numbers as presented are the most up-to-date information we have today in regards to what are the co-funded costs. Those costs are updated annually from the state, and we have not received those updated cost sets. They are in our monthly or twice a month conversations that we are continuing in our planning process with the OFCC. They're holding that information pretty close. So we haven't been privy to what is going to be happening in regards to inflation or contingency, or what the current economy and the current situation is presenting itself in regards to construction costs. But as soon as they are comfortable publicly announcing that to us, we'll be updating our information.
Yeah, and I'm assuming process-wise, that's just going to be part of the board's decision on what they actually go forward with based on the best numbers they'll have at the time. But
Yeah, just let me chime in. Let's make sure we're being really transparent about that. So these costs that you saw today are reflective of the state's 2021 cost sets. They have not yet released their 2022 cost sets. They should be out any day, any week now. So I would fully expect those numbers will get reset before we would bring that back here for the April meeting. And obviously, so we will put some of our own contingency on numbers. We want to make sure we've got more than enough flexibility that we can actually execute on the plan. But the base numbers you see will be based on the state's cost sets because they're what we have to live with. So
when we see those, we'll all have a strong cup of coffee, I guess, and take a deep breath and a little Zen music going on. So.
Yes, I've been working with the OFCC since 2004, and I've not seen a market like this, and how they're going to respond to it is something that I'm more than curious to see how they're going to. Yeah. Because they can't. It's a balancing act of how much can we release and how much do we have to hold back and how much do we have to analyze design, and there's a lot going into it, so they have a lot of pressure right now.
Thanks.
But that's also the reason why segment 4 is 5 projects. Because as you move forward, the state wants, and it's a benefit to the district as well, is that as you move forward with future segments, that you have updated cost sets. It wouldn't be fair to the district or to the state to allocate a facility that's designated for design in 2038 to use 2022 cost sets.
Right.
Just one kind of general comment I do want to throw at the committee. So we've had ongoing conversations with many of our partners, especially Columbus Rex and Park. We've only had very conceptual discussions with them so far because we've not had a public plan that talks about which specific sites we'd be looking to develop first. But I would expect that my teammate Bob and myself will be in close contact with them the rest of this week and certainly over the upcoming weeks. I know some of these sites they're very interested in terms of the idea of co-locating. I know so far we've already entered into agreements to do what they call their center without walls. I pick at them and joke and said, are you willing to talk about a center with a couple walls? So I fully expect we'll have many more discussions with them about whether any of these sites would make sense for them, or maybe we would co-locate. Maybe a school becomes a full rec center or some portion of it becomes a rec center off school hours. I think especially at our elementary sites where we don't have a lot of competing after-hour uses like athletics, like we would see in middle school and high school, that might make a lot of sense. So hopefully some very neat synergies and partnerships we'll continue to explore there as well.
Great.
Alex, I've got a crazy question, and you brought up something I have been thinking about in terms of what do you do with your excess properties? And this kind of sort of gets into that. Can you partner with folks and reuse some of the structures or the land? When you do that, when you partner with folks, is there a problem with the rules, and I forget what the code is, that sort of says that you all have to give first dibs to the property to some groups or some type of entity? Is that affected by that partnership or not?
So I think it depends on the partnership. To the extent we would be looking at disposing of property, leasing and or selling, the answer is yes.
Yes.
So statute is very clear about what the requirements are in terms of disposing of property versus having something like a shared use agreement for a building that we're the primary user of. I don't know that we'd run into those same issues.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other questions, comments?
Thank you.
Thanks again. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Okay.
Thank you.
Look forward to next time.
That concludes our presentations for today. Thank you for your ears and your comments.
No, thank you. Thank you. With that, there's no other agenda items, but I always like to, if we have members of the administration and the board to want to speak, please feel free to do so.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for listening and providing great feedback and questions. Again, we are really excited about what we're seeing, and we are very interested to hear your questions and perspective. So just thank you for this time and your, volunteering to help us really get this right for the future of our district. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I know we have more work to do. And I'll go ahead and let my other board members who are on the call, Board Member Brown, who is ex officio as I am on this committee, and we have a guest with Board Member Beckerly.
I'm on the call as well.
And Dr. Pierce, I didn't see you, sorry.
I'm happy to offer a couple thoughts. And most importantly is, again, to thank you for your time, your insight, and the questions that you pose, as much as any suggestions. I think that's all great. And I like very much the process that we have underway. We've got, there's a lot of transparency here. We're involving community. We're doing this all very visibly. And as a result, we're going to get feedback as we go so that we can either feel good about where we are or so that we can make adjustments as we go to the extent necessary. I think this plan is shaping up nicely. A lot of the conceptual work about where we're headed has been completed and makes a great deal of sense to me. So look forward to your continued guidance and thoughts and suggestions as we proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If I can speak on behalf of the group, it is clear that there is full transparency, and that is a must. As you learned, folks know who's been around a while, that's a good thing. And we certainly aren't questioning that as well at all. But we appreciate it more than anything else, and we get an opportunity to recognize that, we certainly will. And the entire community needs to be aware of that. So again, thank you. Thank you once again. If there's no other comments or questions, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.